we are not. It is a beautiful afternoon to you, and thanks for joining us on our program on television again today, African Discourse. My name is Evan Sunukuge. Well, let me start by saying that a happy holiday to Nigerians out there, and of course, happy Eid al-Maulud to our Muslim brothers and sisters. Well, this program comes your way every Monday at about this time, and of course, we discuss issues, political issues, economic issues, as it relates to issues on the African continent. Well, today we are going to be looking at the 77th edition of the just concluded United Nations General Assembly. It was almost a whole stretch of a month because it started, as a matter of fact, it started on the 3rd day of September. But deliberations will not start until about on the 20th, where we had some African leaders speaking and, of course, mentioning issues as it relates to their country. Well, our own president, President Muhammadu Buhari, was also there. And, of course, he made a course, he made a kind of a plea, so to say now, for debt cancellation as it relates to Nigeria. Well, we understand that the theme of the 77th United Nations General Assembly is actually a watershed moment, transformative solutions to interlocking challenges. And of course, you recall that the issue of climate change has been one big issue on the African continent. And it appears that nations in the African continent seems to be on the receiving side. Well, these are some of the issues we are going to be looking at today on the program African Discourse, as we look at the UN General Assembly concluded Africa's contributions in focus. Well, to look at all this this afternoon, we are so privileged to have Barrister Emmanuel Obakbolo, who is a political analyst and also a public affairs analyst. So welcome to this program, African Discourse.
Good afternoon, Nigerians. Good afternoon.
And also, we also have my big brother friend, a serial author, a human rights activist, and of course, a conflict resolution expert. Nowita Egbutako is always with us on the show. Nowita, welcome to this program.
Good afternoon, viewers.
Okay. All right, so we've got kind of an excerpt from the last edition of the United Nations General Assembly, whereby the president, spoke. So we're going to be having that only after this time. All right, gentlemen, as we set the foundation for today's discussion, we understand that the just concluded United Nations General Assembly is actually the very first one since the fight of COVID-19, the first time that African nations and, of course, world leaders are coming together. They target the person-to-person meeting, unlike the one they had last year, whereby it was done virtually. And the issue of climate change and all that were the issues. So how do we begin to react to some of the issues that were discussed at the last edition? Let's look at Africa in perspective in total. I'll start with Barrister Emmanuel Obakbolo.
Yes, Africa was represented and present by our leaders. And just now, during the assembly, we found out that most African countries, to my mind, went there with something else in the mind, but what they presented was quite different from, to my mind, what they went there with and for. Now, looking at Nigeria, we saw a situation where the president of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari, came up with issues that pertain to Nigeria specifically, wherein he made his own contribution by telling the world what Africa is going through, and in particular what Nigeria too is going through with respect to debt, and how African leaders have come forcefully or otherwise into the debt. And also, though he made some little contributions about the climate crisis and how the international community, particularly the United Nations, need to assist or help Africa to come out of what she finds herself today. But like I earlier said, from the speech of the president, and other presidents of Africa that were at that meeting. They went there with something else in their mind, but presented something. And they were not able to defend what really took them there. Because at the center of the discourse or discussion, as the case may be, we discovered that Ukraine was at the center of it, wherein the world leaders gathered to discuss Russia-Ukraine war. But then Africa was presented to be the most hit of the world. And mind you, Mr. Evans, Africa was not the most hit during the pandemic era. The pandemic nature and the almighty overseer of the universe was able to protect Africa not to have a rigor, so to speak, of the pandemic. So Africa was like the weeping baby that went to the United Nations Assembly to present our own challenges. But whether or not the challenges will be attended to is a matter for another day.
Okay. All right, viewers out there, the program one more time is African Discourse, and we are looking at the just concluded 77th edition of the United Nations General Assembly. Now, a while ago, you saw that video footage of our own president making his own speech. We are still reserving that now. Now, Nowita Igbutako, just like what Barrister Emmanuel Obakolo said, that from his own perspective, it looked as if African leaders went there with a mindset, and on delivery, they delivered something different. I don't know if you have that same opinion too.
Well, that is his own perspective. But for me, it has only been an annual ritual, except for the COVID-19 that disrupted the General Assembly from sitting for since 1 or 2 years now. So I see it as a natural ritual, annual ritual that takes place at the United Nations General Assembly. Because African leaders, they are not pro-people. They're not pro-people. For instance, during the COVID-19, let me start with COVID-19. What did the African leaders do for their citizens to protect them? What did they do specifically? Because we had stories, not even stories, graphic situations where palliatives were not even made available to the people. Ordinary palliatives. Look at those states, all over the state, the federation. Ordinary palliatives were not made, and the Nigerian government collected millions of dollars. They now go to the United Nations to tell the United Nations that Africa was worth it. He mentioned Almighty God. It was God that was on the side of Africans. That God gave us sun, a natural solar power that was able to rebalance back the force of COVID-19. So what are we saying? African leaders are not serious. You said the way they had an agenda, we're going to discover another agenda. What have they been saying? I say it's an annual ritual. Because you get into such a world setting. It is the normal expectation of progressive people that Africa will present themselves properly. What did they go there to deliver? Do they have good news on behalf of African people? African people, they have turned into more or less like ants that they trample upon in Africa. Talking about President Muhammadu Buhari, you want to talk about debt forgiveness of something. What kind of debt forgiveness is he going to get from the General Assembly when at home the resources are being mismanaged? When the zone, the Niger Delta, that produce the oil, that feed Nigeria, that feed the nation, is being neglected. See, the greatest oil theft in Nigerian history taking place under this administration. The other day, the Senate President, Ahmed Lawan, just yesterday, few days ago, when Buhari went to present his budget, 2023 budget, the man was lamented. Ahmed Lawan, he lamented. He said the worst enemies that is confronting Nigeria today are the oil thieves. That billions of naira are going down the drain, and the Buhari government cannot curtail cannot protect the revenue that give us livelihood in Nigeria.
Now, when you talk about Ahmed Lawal, some persons will say that Ahmed Lawal is also part of the government.
He's a part of the government.
So what
for a member of the government to have come out and tell the whole world that he's frustrated and he was lamenting, that shows something is wrong with this government.
Anyway.
So what did Buhari go to do at the United Nations? Debt forgiveness when we are sitting on bottomless pit of resources that could take care of Nigeria and Nigerians. What don't we have in this country? The other day, Ukraine-Russia war exposed Europe. If we expose America, the energy crisis. They have virtually nothing in Europe.
Okay. All right. So let me pause you there, which I call.
What are we saying?
Let's see the video now. The video footage that we have, whereby our own president made his contributions, and let's see how that turns out. We'll be right back.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome His Excellency Muhammadu Buhari, President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Heads of State and Government, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, on behalf of the government and people of Nigeria, I congratulate you on your well-deserved election as President of the 77th session of this August Assembly. I assure you of the full support and cooperation of the Nigerian delegation during your tenure. I commend your predecessor, His Excellency Abdullah Shahid, for the many remarkable achievements of the General Assembly under his leadership during these challenging times. May I also congratulate the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, on his ceaseless and untiring efforts to promote peace, security, and development, very much in line with his exalted role. Mr. President, the first time I could have addressed this August Assembly was in 1984, when I was the military head of state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. 31 years later, I had the great privilege to personally address the Assembly in 2015 as the democratically elected president of my country. As I approach the end of my second and final four-year term, I am reminded of how much has changed in Nigeria, in Africa, and in the world, and yet how some challenges remain. We are now more severely tested by these enduring and the new global challenges, paramount among which are conflicts increasingly being driven by non-state actors, proliferation of small arms and light weapons, terrorism, violent extremism, malignant use of technology, climate change, irregular migration, and disparities in opportunities for improved standards of living. Despite the challenging international environment, the United Nations has proved that it can be strong when the will of its members is harnessed for positive, collective.
Federal Republic of Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari addressing the last address that he's going to be addressing the General Assembly, because by next time he would have left there as the president of the country. Yes. Now, we saw the president talking about some of the achievements, some of the things that his administration has embarked on doing. He talked about, he was trying to talk about the need for the country to turn against light arms and proliferation of small arms and all that. Now, can we still say that some of the African leaders went there for their own personal purpose. I mean, you talked about the debt cancellation a while ago. If a president goes to such, an epitome of, power, and of course requests for debt cancellation, can we say that such a president is not pro-people? I'll start with Barrister Emmanuel.
I want to take us back to memory lane. When then President Olusegun Obasanjo was the president of Nigeria. He did not go to the United Nations Assembly to talk about debt relief. He did not do that. Even before you come up with issues like this in a place, in an assemblage of this magnitude, you must have done your own work. What has the president done? The president went there, listed a plethora of successes that he had. The president went there, listed a catalog of challenges facing Nigeria in particular. The president talked about security. For goodness sake, the president purchased Tucano jets. Where are they?
Billions of dollars.
What is he doing with them? Why should the president go there and begin to talk? See, that was the reason why I did say that the president went there with something else in his mind and addressed plethora of issues
it wasn't
quite different from why the reason he went there.
Yeah, Barrister Emmanuel Bakpolo, we all know that the United Nations General Assembly is a place whereby you bring all your problems to, so long as you are a signatory of that union, as a member of United Nations.
Self-inflicted problems.
What was their response after the president's speech?
What do you expect to have been their response?
That is to tell you, sir, that it was not, this assembly was not meant to come and present homegrown problems, challenges caused by you.
Yeah.
That was their response. Yeah. I watched the body language of the members of the United Nations. I watched their body language. They were not interested in what the president was saying. They were not interested in what African leaders were saying. You know why? Because they know that 90% of the challenges Africa is going through today are caused by African leaders. They are aware. They see situation, the kind of money and monies Africa has. Europe does not have it. South America does not have it.
Don't have it.
Asia does not have it. But here we are. Okay, you brought catalog of challenges before the United Nations General Assembly. Then at the tail end of it, you are not talking of debt relief.
Now, Nowita Igbotako, this is not the first time that we are having a Nigerian head of state, attending the United Nations General Assembly, and of course, making a case for debt recovery. The president came back a few days after that. We heard that the federal government is also making plan to borrow another about $7 billion US, amounting into trillion of naira. Now, what do you think is going on? I mean, for a country to have gone to, for a head of state to have gone to such an assembly, to come back a few days later and make plans.
That shows glaringly the level of insincerity of the present government, the level of unseriousness of the present government.
But some persons view it differently from the way you're looking at it.
I am a professional mediator, conflict resolution person. And if you want to resolve conflict, economic conflict, political conflict, you have to be honest. Nigerian leaders are not honest.
No, you cannot say so.
Most Nigerian leaders are not honest. I don't mention about the issue of COVID-19 a few minutes ago. What kind of government is that? Palliative meant for human beings, Nigerians, were hoarded and kept somewhere for people to die. And the government was collecting billions of dollars. Then we have a country that has a lot of resources. The energy crisis, as I was trying to say in my last opener, the energy crisis in Europe has exposed European countries like Germany, Italy, and the rest. So I'm not telling them to cut electricity. They don't have the energy. Because Vladimir Putin is telling them, hey, I am in Ukraine and I will dictate what happens. The other day, the rating of President Joe Biden was going down because of the energy crisis. the price of gas. And Nigeria has oil. Billions of barrels. Ahmad Lawan was lamented that 100 barrels or billions of oil, crude oil, was being taken away from Nigeria every day. And asking for debt forgiveness when you have resources that can make you a superpower in the world. What are we talking? It is highest level of ridicule. Okay. That the Nigerian president goes to the United Nations, and just as my co-panelist said, what did the United Nations, what did they tell them? They know that the problems were self-inflicted. There's corruption, there's bad leadership, there's no good governance. What are we saying?
Are you trying to say that Nigeria was probably the only country that went there with so much problems? Other nations, but didn't they go there with their own problems?
But that's where they go to, though. We're talking about Africa. But some problems that those presidents came, I don't know whether it was self-inflicted, but we are limiting to Africa and Nigeria. So I'm telling you that, what of the recovered loot? Since 2015, under the EFCC, Ibrahim Magu, you know how many trillions have been recovered? As the Buhari government told Nigerians how much they have recovered. And we are borrowing money. What kind of country is this?
Okay. Now, Barrister Emmanuel Bakolo, let's see some other issues that the African leaders also talked about. We understand that the issue of food insecurity came up too, whereby some of the African leaders made a case for food insecurity on the African continent. That the issue of job creation also came up too. And above it all, one thing that stood clear was the issue of climate change, which has been a recurrent problem year in, year out. Now, what do you think is going on? Because the way climate change has been described at the UN General Assembly is that the African continent is on the receiving end. I mean, we are a consuming nation. The industrial nations of the world, you know, they generate some of these issues that affect our climate and all that. So we on the African continent, we receive all this. But what do you think is going on? Don't you think there should be a time, the time has come now for the Western world for once to listen to the African continent?
I don't think they should listen to African continent. If I'm privileged to be there, I will tell them not to listen to African continent. Because, like we did agree here, the problems African country is going through today is caused by African countries. Take, for instance, the food security. In Nigeria today, farmers can no longer go to farm.
Because of bandits, terrorists.
Why? Insecurity.
Insecurity.
And what is the president, the commander-in-chief, what is he doing about it?
It's helpless.
We saw situations where some prisoners from the Kaduna, Abuja, Kaduna train victims were released. We saw the president went to Kaduna and started congratulating the military. Meanwhile, under that, we were made to understand that some monies were paid for the release of these men. We saw the Zabamani farmers sometime last year who were killed, innocent farmers who were in their farm killing. And the Minister for Information came on air to tell us that they never took permission from the military to go to farm. That was a defense. And yet, somebody will just come up, put up issues that he knows, that he is the architect of the issues, and present to the whole world. The world will just be laughing at us. They know that we are not serious. Now you talk of climate change. For goodness sake, like in Nigeria now, the refineries are not working. So the issue of saying that the gas release, we are the ones suffering it, how? When we take our crude somewhere to go and refine, and they sell it back to us. No refinery is working. And the government is giving excuse to Nigeria that, don't worry, when Dangote refinery will come on board, now all of these challenges will go down naturally.
Okay. All right, viewers out there, the program is African Discourse on Independent Television. We'll quickly take a short pause now, and I'll be right back so that we'll watch more of the President's speech at the last edition of the United Nations General Assembly. Please stay tuned.
Ripped across national borders like a toxic whirlwind, leaving in its wake a legacy of pain and loss. Happily, we are also witnessed an incredible level of innovation and creativity from those who device treatments, and vaccines. These laudable achievements were underpinned by partnerships and international cooperation. We have also seen the bravery, care, and endurance of health professionals.
It's the 2022 Miss ITV Hot Legs Beauty Pageant and Supermodel Contest. Associate sponsors: Edo State Health Insurance Commission, Samotaka Generators and Electronics, your one-stop shop for all household appliances and electronics. Number 66, Wire Road, Benin City. Gia Astoria Lounge, Bar and Restaurant, Wire Road by 5 Junction, Benin City. Global Foods and Cinemas, fast food and restaurant for local and intercontinental delicacies at affordable prices. 59 Urubi Street, Benin City. Shamrock Group of Companies International and Domestic Job Recruitment, Travel, Tours and Flight Booking, Real Estate and Construction. Shamrock Hotel, Lounge and Bar. Head Office, number 12, JBS Estate, GRA, Benin City. EU Flourish Ultra-Modern Hall and Event Center located at Central Park, Obakawaye, off Plymouth Road, Benin City. Mama Ebo Pepper Rice, Akenwa Branch, number 100, Akenwa Road, before Asuro Bus Stop, Benin City. Miss ITV Beauty Pageant and ITV Supermodel Contest, redefining beauty and elegance.
All right, the program is still watching on independent television. You saw a while ago the video adverts now, I would say, of independent Miss ITV Hot Legs, independent radio and television Miss ITV Hot Legs 2022. All right, so you also have Fashion on the Runway. That is an addition. That's also a program that will also come along that program. So you go to Glass House so that you can get more information about the program. Anyway, the program is still on here, independent television, talking about African discourse, African issues. We are looking at the United Nations General Assembly. So let's see more of the video now, where we have the president addressing a section of the General Assembly in New York recently.
May I also congratulate the Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, on his ceaseless and untiring efforts to promote peace, security, and development, very much in line with his exalted role. Mr. President, the first time I could have addressed this August Assembly was in 1984, when I was the military head of state of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. 31 years later, I had the great privilege to personally address the Assembly in 2015 as the democratically elected president of my country. As I approach the end of my second and final 4-year term, I am reminded of how much has changed in Nigeria, in Africa, and in the world, and yet how some challenges remain. We are now more severely tested by these enduring and the new global challenges, paramount among which are conflicts increasingly being driven by non-state actors, proliferation of small arms and light weapons, terrorism, violent extremism, malignant use of technology, climate change, irregular migration, and disparities in opportunities for improved standards of living. Despite the challenging international environment, the United Nations has proved that it can be strong when the will of its members is harnessed for positive collective action. The guiding principles of this extraordinary institution is the promotion of peace and security, development, and human rights. Latest in a chain of events challenging these principles is the Ukraine conflict, which has already created strains that are perhaps unprecedented for a generation. Such a conflict will have adverse consequences for us all, hindering our capacity to work together to resolve conflicts elsewhere, especially in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia.
All right, there, the program stay here. That's the president one more time talking about some of the issues on the global scene. Now, the president talked about the war in Ukraine, and we understand that African nations were also part of the discussions there. Now, African nations voted on the situation, in Ukraine and Russia, and some persons say that the position of Africa was not too encouraging. Gentlemen, I don't know how we may start looking at that. I'll start with Barrister Bakbolo.
Yes, if you look at it, African leaders have made themselves not to have a say in the international community. Because just now, the war in Ukraine, Africa appears to be the most hit. Despite the fact that Africa is very far from where the war is taking place, then we are most hit. Well, even European countries that are most hit, you still see them, life goes on. Things are better off there compared to us who are distanced away from where the war is taking place. For instance, I just saw on the papers this morning where some group of persons are now advising federal government to stop importing wheat, that we can get good wheat here. But the insecurity is causing the problem why we cannot get our own, and we are not depending on Ukraine. So if Ukraine that is in war, Africa is not depending on Ukraine for wheat, then Africa will be hit. And that is why you see today the position here in Africa is very terrible. Today, if you go to buy a loaf of bread, if you buy it today, maybe for 500 naira, tomorrow when you get there, you wear an additional 100 naira, 600 naira, like that. The thing keeps rising, and it has a speed jet in terms of the rising of the prices of goods today in Africa, particularly in Nigeria. So African leaders need to sit tight and begin to reason back home, just like what Asia did. Today we now refer to them as Asian tigers. You talk of Japan, you talk of Taiwan, you talk of China, you talk of the two Koreas, because they sat down and they think inwardly that what can we do for ourselves? So African leaders should stop being dependent on what comes from the Western community. And we claim to be independent nations. Anyway, we just celebrated 62 years of independence. And when a man at 62 that does not have what he can depend on for himself, is that man really independent? That is a question for another day. But when you look at the way our political leaders have plunged us into what I call penury, pains, and poverty, P raised to power 3, then you know that there is a problem. But when we go to international communities like this, we appear to start telling our stories like a fairy tale told in Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
Today, so that is the problem we find ourselves. African leaders should stop narrating stories. They should sit tight and do the needful.
Okay. Now, Noita Gbotako, one is always kind of tempted to ask, what is really the essence of the United Nations General Assembly? Year in, year out, you find world leaders coming together, deliberating on some of the issues plaguing the world, plaguing member states and all that. Now, William Ruto, I think the latest president to have attended that summit now, the Kenyan president now. Now, he made a case again for an African country to be a member of the United Nations Security Council. Now, that is one issue that has come up for a number of times at the General Assembly, and yet we don't still have an African nation. So do you think the United Nations General Assembly, does it want this annual, thing that it has? I mean, this annual, for it to be coming up annually.
Well, that brings me back to the ringleaders, to the founders of the United Nations in 1945, after the Second World War, after Hitlerism, Nazism, Tojoism were flushed down. They became superpowers, and they dictated the pace. Franklin Roosevelt, one of the greatest American presidents, 3-time president. Because of Roosevelt, the American position was altered that it must be 2-term, because he was a great guy. It was Roosevelt's tenure that started the war, Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank that is now caging Africans into economic crisis, into IMF and what have you. It was very Franklin Roosevelt, because the man had foresight. He was a great president. He wanted the United States to be super. So talking about United Nations, the big funders, they have their parochial interests. You have the United Nations Security Council. So Africans and the rest third world countries are just going there to do jamboree. It's a jamboree because they are unserious. They have no mission, they have no vision, and their leaders are not pro people. It is a tragedy on our hands. That's why some people are now saying that 2023 something the narrative should be different. Nigerians are not talking. Nigeria is the most popular black nation on earth. Nigeria is going to be a superpower. Alaji, the former minister of finance, he served the military people to the teeth. He said in the 70s, countries were coming to Nigeria to borrow money. Trinidad and Tobago, he named them. That when they travel to Europe, that they start beating bam for Nigerians because we had oil. We see have oil. Mismanagement of resources. Talking about United Nations. How can George Bush of this world? How can the new lady now Liz Truss in the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
How can all these people? How can they take us serious when they know they are the architect of imperialism? Till tomorrow, France is still eating heavily on the Francophone countries. Go and read the literature. France is still eating neck deep the resources of Africa or Francophone country. That's France. Is it Britain? Is it United States? Talking about United Nations, talking about international politics, global politics. It is the strongest in terms of might that dictates the tone. And it is a sorry state for Africans and Nigerians that we don't have leaders that can come down with a bare chest and say, yeah, let me develop my resources. As I just said, the Russia-Ukrainian war has exposed Europe. Javelin is a superpower, but Germany depends heavily on energy from Russia. Don't we have oil here? By now, we should not be lamenting. When we have oil energy, the other day, Joe Biden was panicky because of November elections. Price of gas went up. So how can this take us serious? When we are sitting on resources, unlimited natural resources, we cannot tap them. What do we have in Germany? Is there any serious natural resources in Germany? But because they've had the opportunity to have good leaders, fantastic visionary leaders.
And it was structured.
Yeah, well structured. Yeah. In spite of the division of the Cold War, the East and West Berlin, they still came back and become a super country. Okay. So what are we talking? So the United Nations was set up by leaders. All these global organizations, they have been propelled by characters. Okay.
Now, Barrister Bakolo, the issue happening in Burkina Faso, where we have Ouagadougou, as the capital city now, where we have a coup d'etat, the second time in 8 months. We have a new general there now who is the head of state. And of course, he has promised that there's going to be an election soon. Now, this issue did not come up at the UN General Assembly. What is going on? How can Africa as a continent, it is only in Africa that we probably still hear this kind of scenario whereby coup d'etat, still happen?
Yes, because at the United Nations General Assembly, Africa was a mere invitee.
No, you cannot say so.
Africa was and we remain a mere invitee until we turn things around.
By ourselves.
These people will not take us serious. It is you that will take yourself serious first. You tell yourself the truth. By the time you finish telling yourself the truth, then you will know whether there is need for you to work harder. By the time you work harder, then you are beginning to go to places. Today you see Africa is always the weeping baby when it comes to international community.
Almost everything.
Every time we go there with a plethora of problems. We go there with a catalog of issues and we begin to present them. Africa does not have one issue to tackle. Even amongst the African leaders, you see the disintegration amongst them. You don't see the one mind. You don't see them speaking, even from the AU angle. In the AU meetings where African leaders ought to discuss African problems and provide solutions to them, they don't. Instead, they go there for self-aggrandizement. Yeah. You see them going there like the peacock, going there like the flamingos, and they begin to show off, I am the big brother, the biggest brother in Africa. That shouldn't be the issue just now. We need we need a unified Africa, a continent that can progress. Nature has gifted Africa everything that Africa needs to rule the world. The manner of leaders we now have our problems. And that is why, if we don't take ourselves serious, is it the international community that will not take us serious? The answer is an emphatic no. And that is why you see, anytime Africa goes there, from the day one the assembly starts, you begin to see that they begin to discuss issues that pertain to the Western world. And they will come up with one issue, and they will provide solution to that issue. They will take decision. But by the time Africa comes on board to begin to present our problems, Africa will begin to present a catalog of problems. The different African countries will present different problems. But in Europe, the Europeans will present one issue that pertains to all European countries.
Continents, yeah.
Likewise, the South and North America. Yes. So, but yeah, we come with different, and the people begin to look at us. What manner of human beings are these persons? So, and that is why you see, Africa cannot have a say in the United Nations Assembly until we sit down to do something about our issues. And that is why today, you see, we've been clamoring for a member in the United Nations Security. No, they are not taking us issue because, for instance now, Nigeria that ought to lead other African countries is barricaded with so many issues. Insecurity is there, but we present to the world that there is no insecurity. Nigeria is in war. We present to the international community that Nigeria is not fighting war. You have embezzlement. Now, the issue now being discussed to capture the minds of Nigeria from the general election come 2023 is now oriented. We saw a situation where even the Senate president started shouting, who are the thieves?
They know them.
With all due respect, the politicians are.
They know them.
I cannot go and begin to partake in that kind of risky venture.
You cannot say the politicians
they are. And that is why today, I heard over the news this morning that the man they gave to secure the pipeline, like the person of Tom Polo now, he has been able to secure about 40-something. So, where are those leakages? Who did those leakages? We had the military there.
Yeah, but don't you think it's because he has, I mean, you are from the Niger Delta, which I would tackle. Now, do you see, because some persons have actually faulted, the choice of Tom Polo. But again, Tom Polo has, don't you think he has what it takes? I mean, he has the information. Because he knows the Niger Delta better than any other person. Don't you think so?
He knows the terrain.
He knows the terrain.
As you said.
Yeah.
And he is not a fantastic guy, so to say. He is not even a patriot. Tom Polo is being used by politicians.
No, we're talking about securing our pipelines
because
now.
He knows the terrain.
Yeah.
He knows the people who are into illegal bunkering and all that. He knows the superpowers.
Is it that he knows? Let us be mindful when we say he knows the
because
people.
that's why he's been contracted. He has the antecedent. He's been there. Okay. We know the origin of government of Polo. He was one of the boys that took all arms and started fighting another data issues the other day, some years ago. So he's heavily harmed. And from what we know, he's even sponsoring politicians in other data. I know. I'm a civil society activist.
Well, all these allegations.
I can mention names, deputy governor that are the payroll of government Tom Polo. He's rich to the neck. He's a multi-billionaire. And because he's entrenched in the system, that's why they look around. Who are we going to use again? And he will play their game.
All right, gentlemen.
They will just open up a few...
Gentlemen, as we try to make preparations to end the show today. Now, let's come back to the issue of the Security Council thing, because Nigeria, we're going to be having an election next year. And it is Rwanda, South Africa, and I think Kenya has also come to the list now when we consider nations that can make it to be a member of the Security Council at the United Nations. Let's look at Nigeria. 2023 election. After 2023 election, can we see Nigeria as a country that maybe in future, when we begin to think of a nation, an African nation that will be considered to be a member of the United Nations Security Council, can Nigeria be after next year's election? Barrister Emmanuel.
Yes, the possibility is there. The opportunity is there. The space has provided for us a chance to get into it, because this country, the countries you just mentioned just now, we saw their elections went smoothly.
Are you saying with just a free and fair election that
if we would have a free and fair election, just like Kenya. We saw in Kenya, the people came, voted, and somebody said, no, we must go to court. At the end of the day, the judiciary stood our ground and said, this is the position. We saw same in Rwanda. We saw same in South Africa, and also in Ghana. So if Nigeria just now can sit down and said, okay, the general election, just like the president has promised, and he kept making the promises, and I know he's going to make more promises with regards to the general elections come 2023. Let the election, 1, be fair. 2, be credible.
Yeah.
3, let the election reflect the mind of the people of Nigeria. Nigerians should be the one that should elect who is going to be the president, and not a few persons in conspiracy with the electoral body that we elect who is going to be. We don't want court cases. We want a situation where after election, somebody will say, yes, I accept this result. Not that after election, we begin to contest the result. However, it same could happen out of greed, but we are saying that the election should be like the one that happened in 1993 in this country. Once upon a time, election took place in this country. Even the opposition, they say, yes, we agree this election. They didn't go to court. Election conducted by military government. Then if a military government can conduct that kind of election, then a democratic government should do better.
No, next year's election, will it be just enough, even if we're going to have a free and fair election? Because we are looking at so many indices now. We're talking about economic viability, economic stability, and of course, stability in all facets of nationhood for a country to be considered as a member of the United Nations Security Council. So if after next year's election, Nigeria maybe gets it right due to popular choice and all that, the candidate becomes the people's choice and all that, will Nigeria still stand to be a member of the Security Council at the UN?
Well, just as I said, if we put our hearts together, because this discussion reminds me of people like Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. These are visionary leaders that came out from their different It was people, the Nkrumahs of this world. It was the Abdel Nasser of this world from Egypt. It was Modibo Keita from Mali. It was, name them, that made Africa what Africa was after the decolonization. But imperialist powers, they now decided on them. We knew what happened. But now, Nigeria after 62 years, there's hope on the horizon. Never in the history of Nigeria, never, as the kind of movement that is going on in Nigeria is taking place. So there's hope. If the hope is sustained by the Nigerian people, like what happened last year, October 2022, October 2020, the NSAS problems, we know what led to the NSAS wahala, the police brutality and the rest. And it is the NSAS mentality that has manifested into the movement that we see today. And the movement is known to everybody. We cannot deny it. The movement is known in Toronto. The movement is known in New York. The movement is known in anywhere. So there's hope that if Nigeria can queue behind a character that we see in front of us, leading this movement. I don't want to mention it because I'm not campaigning now. If Nigerians can be serious, step up their game, and keep behind the character we see, that leading this movement, there's hope for Nigeria. Okay. Because this character is already talking about production. That Nigeria, we have a lot of... A consumer nation cannot be great. You go with
your spoon in hand, cap in hand.
Cap in hand. Yeah. That when we go to the Western powers, how can Nigeria president to the United Nations, cap in hand, begging for debt for goodness, when you have the resources under your life?
All right, gentlemen, because of time.
There's hope.
2033.
Yeah. I use the opportunity to tell Nigerian people, I'm a civil society person. Let's keep hope alive. INEC has told us there's going to be a free and fair election. There's going to be an electronic transfer of results. Nigeria be alert. Nigeria be consistent. Let's be nationalistic. 2023 is a day for Nigerians. There's hope.
All right, viewers out there, and for the guests here, I really want to say a very big thank you, Barrister Emmanuel Bakbolo and also Nowita Ibutako. Talking about the United Nations, last one that has just been held at United States in New York to precise, the 77th edition, and the position of African leaders. Well, you see that much is so much desired now in Nigeria about next year's election. So that's the reason why that you as an electorate out there, you must make sure that you prepare so that you can vote the right person. So that by next year, which is going to be the 78th edition. So by then, Nigeria's president, who will be the Nigeria's president then, we do not know.
Popular choice.
But we just pray he's going to be the popular choice, yes. So that Nigeria as a nation can stand up with head high to talk at the General Assembly, you know, as you know, the show goes on. Well, a very big thank you one more time, gentlemen, for finding time to come on the show today. And also for you, the viewer out there, a very big thank you. My name is Evans Unokoge. Until same time next week, bye-bye, and God bless you.